Welcome, everyone, to Restoring Biodiversity in Your Own Garden. We'd love to know who's joining us today, so please take a moment to put your name and where you're located in the chat, and then we'll get started soon. We're just going to give everybody a minute to join and come on in. We've got people from all over the place: Chicago, Washington, Los Angeles, Ohio, ooh, London, across the pond. Okay, so we'll get started. I want to thank everyone for being here with us today to learn about how we can reverse the decline of butterflies, bees, and songbirds in our own backyards. My name is Kara, and I'm the development manager here at World Animal Protection. For anyone who's new to World Animal Protection, we are on a mission to change the world, the way the world works, to end animal cruelty and suffering. For over 70 years, we've been rewriting the story for animals, working across 50 countries with offices in 12. We focus on exposing cruel systems, promoting and supporting animal-friendly alternatives, influencing legislation for policy change, and campaigning to mobilize grassroots influence. This is my very first webinar with World Animal Protection, and I'm thrilled to be doing it with you. So I'm going to pass it along to our host, Garden for Wildlife CEO, Shabir Ali.
Thank you so much, Kara, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm actually going to share my screen in a moment. I just saw one question posed in the chat. Yes, I believe it is being recorded, so it'll be for afterward as well, right, Kara? Okay.
Yeah, and it'll be emailed to you afterwards.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully you all can see this. And so thank you everybody for making time today. I know everybody's perpetually busy, and so I appreciate you taking time to listen to this talk, and hopefully we'll have a really good Q&A at the end as well. I don't want to spend the whole time just talking at you, but I want to tell you a little bit of a story that is my own story as well, but then also about Garden for Wildlife and how we got here. So I want to start with actually something that came up in a conversation that I had last year. We did some work with students at American University. We're based here in Maryland, just outside of DC, and Garden for Wildlife was focused on by the students at American University. And one of the things for their senior capstone project in their business school class, and one of the things that they brought up that was really interesting was that, you know, from their perspective as Generation Z, there's just so much negative that they hear all the time about all the things that have been done in the world. There's so many problems that are just too massive for individuals to impact. You know, whether it's the plastic in the Pacific Ocean, it's the, you know, it's the droughts and water problems, it's the climate change, obviously, pollution in the rivers, there's so many problems out there that even if you do the right thing at the individual level, you use a metal straw instead of a plastic straw, or reusable shopping bag, or you take a shorter shower or whatever else, you're not going to see the impact immediately of what you're doing. It's just too big of a problem. But what they really liked about Garden for Wildlife, and what I want to talk to you about today, is that this is a problem that actually you can fix at the individual level and see the difference at the individual level as you're making the fixes, as you're doing the things you're doing to help restore biodiversity and help the declining pollinators and songbirds and the rest. So I want to get into what the problem is first. So the problem out here that needs to be fixed is actually a massive one here in North America. I'm guessing some of you are already quite aware of this problem, but I'll go through some of the symptoms right off the bat. So 90% of the monarchs are gone. Everybody knows about the monarch, and of course, milkweed being the thing that they need to eat. The caterpillars need to eat, and specific species of milkweed. They were just listed as endangered recently, but it's not just the monarchs. It's actually 1 in 4 native bee species that here in North America, and I believe there are about 400 different bee species in North America, are at risk of extinction. People like to talk about the danger for the honeybee. There's actually a very good article recently that came out that actually kind of exposes a little bit of the mistake in the conventional wisdom about that. Yes, colony collapse disorder is real. Yes, honeybees have been suffering in the US, but it's actually a different problem. One is that the actual number of hives has been increasing, but honeybees are actually from Europe. They're not a native bee species. They were brought here for the honey, and they were used for industrial agricultural production. But the native bee species are actually at risk of extinction, in part because they're now competing for the food as well from the farmed bee species. And more importantly, for some people, is the songbirds. Songbirds have been disappearing for decades now. Over 3 billion nesting pairs of songbirds have disappeared. And these are all connected, these problems. But why? So I want to get into more of the detail of the problem and then how it gets to the underlying cause of it. So there's actually a risk of extinction of species across over 2 million different species around the planet. We're losing biodiversity like crazy across the planet. And one of the biggest single drivers is human impact as a result of the loss of natural habitat. And that is the most significant driver. Now, what does that mean? Professor E.O. Wilson from Harvard University has passed away a few years ago, but probably one of the preeminent voices in this field had said, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase he's much more eloquent. You know, if we as a species disappeared, if humans disappeared in 10,000 years, you would never even known we were here. But if insects disappeared, we'd be like in chaos within 100 years. Our entire society would collapse. And why? Because we rely on them so much for things like food production. In fact, some of you may have seen photos like this. This is actually a picture of what a produce section of a grocery store would look like if we didn't have pollinators. A vast majority of the food that we get right now, in fact, I believe a statistic I read recently from Ontario, Canada, their agricultural division said essentially 1 out of every 3 bites you eat was created or made possible by a pollinator. So it's really important that we're losing them. And if those of you who are older like me, may remember when I was a kid driving across California in my parents' station wagon, the front windshield would be covered in bug splatter. Every time you pulled in the gas station, you'd have to clean off the windshield. Today, when I drive, I just drove from New Jersey back to DC on Monday, and there were no bugs impacts on my windshield at all. And it's not because my car is a lot more aerodynamic, it's because there are a lot less bugs in the air. And that should really terrify people. So what can we do this? First, how did this happen? It happened because of something we've been doing for over 200 years. And I learned about this when I read this book right here. And this is the book that started Garden for Wildlife, the company. So Doug Tallamy, who's a professor at University of Delaware, wrote this amazing book, came out about 4.5 years ago. If you haven't read it, highly recommend you read it. It's called Nature's Best Hope. And this is the book that changed my life because I read the book and I understood what the problem was. Because I've been gardening for over 20 years. I've been a supportive environmental organization, including wild animal protection, for many years. But I had been actually going to the local garden center and buying plants, flowers, other sorts of things, putting them in my garden, thinking that these were actually helping with the environment. When in fact, as I discovered when I read the book, they weren't. They were actually making things worse because what I was planting was invasive species. I didn't know it because I didn't know what a native plant was or an invasive. I just knew these were pretty flowers and shrubs, and I put them in my garden. So I read the book and I said, okay, we need to put in native plants and replace this. Because what we've been doing for the last 200 years is putting lawns in everywhere. And America has transformed into a giant lawn-driven country. I grew up in Southern California where virtually every house has a lawn, and it makes no sense in the middle of the desert, especially with the water conditions they have, to grow lawns. But this is what we do. We create these sterile environments. And what's really interesting about lawns is that if you look at the root systems of native plants or plants in general versus grass, just to give you a sense of the scale here, on the far left, that's lawn. So that's about 6 inches is the root structure. So if you look at lawn, the roots only go down about 4 to 6 inches. And then below that, solid dirt. So when you pull up the lawn, it's just compacted dirt. And that has a bunch of implications I'll get back to later. But you look at the root systems of these native plants across the board here, and you can see they go down as much as 15 feet, which has a tremendous positive impact on the soil, water absorption, place for beneficial insects to grow and live and do all these other things, and also sequester carbon. So I'll come back to the buying the wrong plants. So I would go to the garden section of every major, where I live now, it's Lowe's. Before it used to be Home Depot or Ace Hardware or what have you. And you'd see row after row of this. And the problem is that these are all actually, it turns out, invasive species. So when I read Professor Tallamy's book, I realized I need to find native plants. So the first thing I thought was, well, let me just go buy the native plants they carry at Lowe's. So I went to my local Lowe's, and I'm not picking on Lowe's. That just happened to be the closest garden center to my house. And I literally Googled for 3 hours every single plant in the store, and not one of them was native. And this is where the penny started to drop for me as to how big the problem really was, is that people are going and buying these plants because they don't know. So you need awareness, then you need education to what's native to me, and then you need availability, which was the next part of the problem. Because then I started looking for native plants and finding it was difficult to find places where you can actually get them. Sometimes you're lucky and there's a nursery nearby, but oftentimes there's not. So for consumers, the problem becomes, I don't know about native plants, and when I do learn about it, they're not easy to find and buy. The big box retailers are selling these fast, pretty plants, and they're almost exclusively invasive species. Local nurseries oftentimes have limited selection of native plants. And then there are a number of catalogs out there that you can buy from. But what I was finding is that oftentimes you still had to do the research as to what specifically in the catalog was native to you. They sell native plants, but they're native somewhere. And in fact, the joke is everything's native somewhere. It's just you need what's native to your region. So what do we do? I should back up for a second. So what we did was, at the time, I was a partner at Accenture, which is a large consulting firm, and I also was a supporter of the National Wildlife Federation, in addition to World Animal Protection and others. And so I went to the National Wildlife Federation and I said to them, I have a problem as a consumer, and I think a lot of other gardeners have this problem as well, is that we don't know about native plants. Once we know about native plants, they're hard to find. So I did a pro bono project with them to help build what became an e-commerce site. And that e-commerce site was what you see now, gardenforwildlife.com, where it would be a place where you could go in and actually just type in your zip code and only see plants that were native to where you live, and then buy them right there online. You could filter them based on height or color or season of bloom or soil type or light conditions, all the things you do like with a Yelp filter. But it would allow you to buy the plants and have them delivered right to your doorstep. So all you do literally is dig a hole in the ground, put them in the ground, and then sit back and wait, because you don't need fertilizers, you don't need pesticides, you don't need all kinds of things, because these plants are native to where you are. So we launched that company in 2021. That was right at as the pandemic was kind of in its peak. And a lot of people were getting into gardening, which is good. So a bit of brief history here. NWF was founded back in 1936. They actually launched a program, and why it's Garden for Wildlife is because Garden for Wildlife is actually a 51-year-old program. It was launched in 1973 as a way to educate people about the importance of native plants. And what we discovered was education's not enough. They have tons of great content, but you had to make them available. And then they also launched at the same time a program around certified wildlife habitats. And certified wildlife habitats are something you can do. You can get a sign like this. It's really cool in your yard. I have one because my garden is now certified, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But by 2018, they had certified over 250,000 properties across the country, mostly homes, but also about 10,000 schoolyards, I believe, mostly elementary schools across the country. In 2021, we created gardenforwildlife.com to make it easy for people to buy these plants. And then I went back to them in 2022 and said, you need to make this a separate company, because you can't grow an e-commerce business inside a not-for-profit. You're not aligned in terms of how you're structured, what you need to do, et cetera. Long story short, they agreed to spin it out on the condition that I come in and be the CEO. So I quit my perfectly good job, and I got this much more amazing job being the CEO of this really important business, which is helping people get native plants to help restore the environment and biodiversity. And that officially, the spin out happened. It took about 10 months to do all the legal work and the rest. So we spun out last September, and we are now a separate company owned primarily by the National Wildlife Federation. So they own about 80%, and then employees and investors own the rest. And we brought in outside investors. Our mission statement is really simple. We exist to drive a massive increase in the planting of native plants across America by making it easy for people and organizations to learn about, find, and then get the right locally native plants. And why is that important? Because again, as I said, it's not enough to be native. It has to be native to where you are. And that becomes critical as we're trying to help restore the biodiversity that's out there. So I'm going to, hang on, let me just jump ahead for a second here, because I want to change to a video. I'm going to show you really quickly. I just need to see if I can do this. Let me share my screen. And I think hopefully you'll be able to hear the share sound. Here we go. Okay. Let me know that you can hopefully all see this. All right. Hopefully you saw that, and I still love that video. So I'm gonna go back to my presentation now. So the 1 million certified wildlife habitats, our goal is to get every customer, and we've sold to tens of thousands of customers in the last few years. Since those numbers, I'll give you the updated numbers in a moment, but our goal is to get everybody not just to put some plants in, but ultimately go down the journey to become a certified wildlife habitat, which is really not that hard. And it's something that actually it's the data that NWF has shows that once people put these signs up and certify their yard, their neighbors are 60% more likely to do something like that with their yard, which is great because then we start to create the evangelism and push this across to more and more places. But so I want to talk to you about my yard because this is the place that this all started for me. So about the same time I read Doug's book, I started working on my yard, and I took a section of lawn because I hate lawn, and I wanted to put in a garden, and then I realized I needed native plants, and I became the very first customer for Garden for Wildlife before I joined the company. I dug out this area here that was supposed to look kind of heart-shaped, but my wasn't quite exactly heart shaped, but I tried. And I dug out a pond in the middle, and I was on a lot of conference calls, as you do when you're in the consulting world. And so I just put it on mute and would sit there and start shoveling. And I dug a pond, and then I planted. And these are the first plants that were sold by Garden for Wildlife, which are in my yard now. What's really interesting is what happened next, because you think, look at this big sterile line, look at how far away all the forest and woods are around there. And things started to show up in my yard, specifically things like turtles. I now have 3 turtles living in my pond. I don't know how they found it. They must have come out of the woods from somewhere and came over and moved into my pond. And now I have turtles there. I have butterflies. I have multiple species of birds since we put up birdhouses there. Frogs showed up one summer. I don't know where the frogs came from, but now there's this incredible symphony every night. As spring has started again, they've started croaking. This is that same piece of lawn 1 year later, just to give you a sense of the transformation of what's happened here. And of course, you can imagine the amount of pollinators and birds and things that have now moved into this area as well. Why this is for me inspiring is because anybody can do this. You can take a small corner of your yard. You don't have to change your whole thing. I'm trying to because I love this kind of look in meadows, but anybody can take it. Take a container and put it on your porch. Take a portion of your lawn, and you'll start to see a difference within a year. And that's a key part of what we're telling people is, yard by yard, porch by porch. So the impact we've made in just 2 short years. We've now planted, the numbers continue to go up. We've now planted slightly over 1 million square feet of habitat across the 41 states we now operate in. We've helped all these different species of bees and butterflies, and we planted over 20,000. In fact, our customers have planted over 20,000 gardens, which is all amazing, but we're still just getting started. And you can see kind of the impact of across different states of where we've planted. We have, since this map was made, we've since added 4 more states. We are not on the West Coast yet, and we are still working to expand. The main limitation on our expansion is identifying and partnering with growers. We have to find local native plant growers that meet our specifications, certifications, no pesticides, no neonics, nothing that can actually harm the environment. And then we get them into our system and we add them to what we're doing. But we're doing more than just that. The video mentioned briefly our 1-for-1 program, which is about making sure that plants get everywhere and to support environmental justice. So a key part of this is that if you think of it from the point of view of the pollinators and the birds, for instance, they don't care what your zip code is. They don't care how affluent you are. They need to go where they need to go. And so we thought, well, it's important to make sure we get native plants everywhere to support those communities that have been marginalized in the past and don't have access to these kinds of things. So let's go put them there. And so it's a bit like Bombas and Warby Parker, but for native plants. And so the very first one we did was last June, was in East Baltimore. And we put in about 400 plants plus some shrubs and trees and created a garden in what was a vacant lot in East Baltimore. The next one we did was actually in Detroit. And we've done more since then. There's another one we did in September in Connecticut. But actually, just last year, we did a total of 87 community gardens, hundreds of plants each donated across many different states. And we're doing more and more this year. And it's a free program. So not-for-profits, community gardens, schoolyards, et cetera, can apply on our website. It's really simple. And we ship them free plants. They cover the shipping. Shipping is very cheap. But then we've said normally it's a couple hundred plants at a time. but we're trying to get more of these out there in more places. So also, if you happen to know organizations that could be looking for plants, please let me know, because we would love to work with them and help. We're also focusing on fostering small businesses. And why that's important is because small business is the engine of the economy. Everybody knows the names of Fortune 500s, but the reality is most of our economy is actually driven by small business. And what we're trying to do is support small growers, particularly native plant growers. So Hidden Gem Farm is one of the most recent ones we added in Chesapeake, Virginia. They're a great husband and wife couple, and they really wanted to grow native plants for us, but they didn't have a facility. So we built them this greenhouse you see in this picture here, and they are growing native plants for us right now. The first ones will be shipping in a couple of weeks. And then we get, essentially we get reimbursed for the greenhouse through a slight discount on the plants for the first 2 years until the greenhouse is paid off. And then they own the greenhouse and they continue to grow for us for years to come. But we're helping to foster small businesses this way. And we are working on expanding the reach of that across more states. So again, if you happen to know native plant growers or people who want to be native plant growers who might have a nursery or something like that, please let me know, because we're always looking for more partners. Another thing that we launched, I'm really excited about, and this comes to the partnership with World Animal Protection. In January of this year, we launched a program which is focused on not-for-profits. So if you think about not-for-profits, as we're, I'm sure, all familiar, there's a large portion that comes from things like donations and grants. And if you think about your own wallet, if you think about your own money, the way I think about my wallet is part of my paycheck goes to mortgage, or it could be rent, car payment, food, eating out, entertainment, clothing, travel, et cetera. And then there's charity, right? And the problem is that not-for-profits are all competing for the same charity bucket. And so I get probably 15 to 20 letters a week in the mail from all these great, worthy not-for-profits that are looking to get donations from me that I simply can't donate to. There's too many of them out there. But we thought, well, if people are spending $50 billion a year on gardening, which is what they spend in the US on gardening, what if we could get some of that money that's in the gardening wallet and stick it in the charity wallet? And so it was really that simple. And so we launched a program back in January for not-for-profits where they can come and sign up. And literally, it's a very simple sign-up form, but then they get a unique link to our store, which they can send out to their supporters. And then if anybody buys native plants from our store from that link, that not-for-profit gets 15%. So it's a really simple way for them to get additional money that people were spending anyways on gardening, but now it goes to their worthy cause. So we launched this program. Obviously, World Animal Protection is a partner in this program, and we'll share the link more later. I think it's also going to go out in the email. We've signed up many others as well. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology, for those who know them, they're a partner of ours. We partnered on the Great Backyard Bird Count, which was back in February. Rotaries, we're working with a number of clubs out there, but also the National Wildlife Federation, local state affiliates, PTAs. It's across the board. Water conservation districts, any sort of not-for-profit. They're with partners. Since we launched this a little over 2 months ago, over 60 different affiliates have signed up already. So what can you do? So I've talked a little about the big picture of the problem, disappearance of pollinators. Native plants are important and a key reason why they've been disappearing, and it's something you can put in your own yard and start to see them come back. So what can you do as an individual watching this webinar tomorrow or even today? So the first thing is Homegrown National Park, which is a not-for-profit that is also a partner of ours, and they started as a result of the book that Professor Talamy wrote. He actually put the concept out there in the book and then created a not-for-profit around it called Homegrown National Park. The idea being that if we all took a portion of our lawns and turned them into native habitats, we could actually create a national park virtually across the country that's bigger than many of our national parks today combined, right? So it's just the sheer amount of lawn we have in this country is staggering. So the first thing you can do is just start with a container or a small corner of your yard. And when I say small corner, I mean like a 4 by 6 foot section. Just, cut out the grass there, put some, rocks around it, or those edgers you can get again at a Home Depot or Lowe's, and then put in the native plants and see what happens, because you'll be amazed at how quickly the wildlife shows up. I like to tell the story of a good friend of mine from my consulting days, lives in Chicago in the kind of inside the Loop area, and he has a loft there. And when I came over to Garden for Wildlife, I said, James, you need to get some native plants. He's like, look, I've got a balcony in the city. What am I going to get? I said, just get a 3-pack and get started. So he did. He indulged me. He bought some planters, got some dirt, put in the 3-pack of native plants. A month later, he texted me and he was just like, dude, you won't believe this. I have a monarch on my balcony. I mean, just the sheer joy that he got from like, and he wasn't expecting it at all. I said, look, they know where to go. Wildlife knows what to do. If we just do a little bit to help it come back, it'll be different. So the first thing you can do is just get started, even if it's one pack of plants. The second thing is buy more plants. More native plants, even better. We have a wide range of native plants. If you have a local native plant nursery, go there and support them, right? You don't have to buy from us. Just put native plants in instead of whatever other species you might have been thinking about, because now it's spring and everybody's gardening who has a yard. So think about putting native plants in instead, or at least in part. And if you do it using the link that we will send out, then World Animal Protection will get 15%. So you're actually supporting World Animal Protection at the same time. And the last thing is, we launched late last fall and it ends at the end of this month. So it's about 2 weeks left in it. We actually launched a campaign to open this up to everybody, because now we are actually a corporation. We're not a not-for-profit. We actually open it up so anybody can invest. And what we did was we created what's called crowdfunding. We have a platform that was set out there, and we opened it up to the general public. And lots of people have come in because people can invest $250 and buy shares in the company. And the twist we have as well is, if you're already a Garden for Wildlife customer, which can mean you go buy some plants and then you're a customer, and then you invest, you get back every dollar you invest in $25 increments for what you invest as gift cards. And the idea here is we want to make you an evangelist to go and get other people to start putting native plants in. So if somebody invests $250, they will get 10 $25 gift cards, which they can then give to other people to get them to go and start their own garden. So it becomes kind of a network effect and propagation. And it's really simple. If you're interested, invest.gardenforwildlife.com. So that's what you can do. That's Garden for Wildlife. Hopefully I've given you a little sense of why native plants are really important. I'll give you one other factoid from the book for those of you who haven't read Nature's Best Hope. But if you haven't read it and you're at all interested, I highly recommend you get the book. One nest of chickadees, which is small bird, we have them near us. One nest, apparently from the time they hatch to the time they leave the nest, will eat between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars. That's one nest. So when you start to see the disappearance of the pollinators and their caterpillars, and the caterpillars are the food for the baby birds, you start to understand why so many birds have been disappearing. So it's important not just to bring back the pollinators, but this becomes a primary food source for a lot of these birds, which have also disappeared. So I'll leave you with that. It's really important. If you want to make a start, it's as simple as putting in one native plant. And right there, I'll pause and pass it over to Kara.
Thank you so much. That was awesome and super informative. And I somehow learn something every single time we talk. But I've had the pleasure of working with Garden for Wildlife and with Shubber throughout this partnership, and I've learned so much. When we first started talking last year, I really didn't have any knowledge of gardening, even in general. And now we have a container garden in our super tiny side yard of my house, full of native plants that we did get from Garden for Wildlife. So my partner and I are working on that, and we're very excited to see, hopefully, more butterflies and birds this summer and spring, and even some bees. Getting over my bee fear for the sake of the garden. So this partnership has offered a really unique way for our community to live out our mission every day. And not only just by purchasing plants from Garden for Wildlife, which are funding our mission to end animal suffering, but by having a garden, whether it's a large garden, a container garden, something small on your patio of your apartment, you're providing sanctuary to the pollinators that you are sharing your community with. So it's a really wonderful example of how collaboration and small changes can make a huge impact on the world around us. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to hand it back to Shubber for Q&A. As Mackenzie mentioned before, there is a Q&A box that you can add questions into, so feel free to add anything you'd like to know.
All right, thank you. And I'm just typing the first answer. So for those who are wondering, it's Nature's Best Hope by Doug Tallamy. I put it both in the Q&A and also in the chat. Fantastic book. It's a really easy read. It was so eye-opening for me. I told him when I first met Professor Tallamy last year, he's now actually a scientific advisor to Garden for Wildlife as well. So he's on our advisory board. when I first met him, I had this moment where it was like, for those of you who have seen the movie Field of Dreams, I felt a little bit like Kevin Costner when he first meets James Earl Jones. And I was like, your book changed my life. He's like, oh, you're one of those hippies, get out of it. And I was like, he was much nicer about that. But the book really did change my life, or I wouldn't be here. This company wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that book. So I highly recommend you read it. Let me see what questions we have here in the Q&A. All right. So, Kim, you had a question here about, can we work with Lowe's, Home Depot, and Ace to start selling native plants? That's actually our goal. We're still just too small to even be on their radar. But it's very much in our strategic plan. We already have our first retail partnership, which is with Wild Birds Unlimited. So if you know the store Wild Birds, it's a franchise store. There's about 350 stores across the US and Southern Canada. And if you're a bird lover, you probably know about this store because they're all over the place. And we're actually working with them now so that they will be selling, some of the stores will actually be carrying our plants in stores, so you can buy them there as well. And we ship them to the store, and then they make it easier for people to get those. But it's also a great way to just get people to start. But ultimately, I would like, just like organics in your local grocery store, when it started, it was always in niche stores, and then you started to see a little section, and now they're everywhere. Or plant-based milks, where, it used to be, again, soy milk was this niche thing. And now when I walk into my local Safeway, 2 out of the 5 cases in the dairy section are actually non-dairy milks, right? They, oat milk and almond milk and cashew milk and soy milk, et cetera. I want, when people walk into a Home Depot garden center or a Lowe's or Walmart or Ace, what they see is native plants by Garden of Wildlife, because they will have then the education availability at point of purchase, and people will still go where it's convenient. So we want to be where they are. We're just not there yet. So we do the home delivery. Let's see. So Deb, unfortunately, we're not in the UK, but the National Wildlife Federation's database, the Native Plant Finder, which is the basis for our zip code sorting, I don't believe that covers the UK yet, but I can find out, and we can certainly get back to you on that. So Mike, yes, great question. What's been the most effective way of educating? I've given away probably 80 copies of Doug's book, which is great as a one-on-one thing. These webinars and conversations like this, and I'm doing a lot of public speaking now and podcasts, certainly help. NWF has been doing this for 50 years. And so you have great people there like, Dave Mazjewski, you've got people who run things like Rebecca, who runs their Monarch program. They're all out there on different soapboxes, evangelizing to people. Dave's been on television. He was on with Martha Stewart not long ago, all pushing this. I think it's really just, especially in this day and age where we have so much information coming at us all the time from so many different places, it's about repetition of the message. What's nice is you're starting to see more and more about native plants in things like mainstream press, like the Washington Post, the New York Times, again, Martha Stewart Magazine, other places like that. If everybody does a little bit, we'll get the message out there. And this is why also we want to turn people into evangelists. So go from awareness to education to action to evangelism, so that people then get other people to become native plant gardeners until eventually everybody has at least some in their yards. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Oh, Mark, I love that about the native plants just coming back in your yard. That's one of the things I tell people as well. So some of those plants that you saw in the photo I shared of my yard, their seeds are now being scattered, and I've started to find things like black-eyed Susans just popping up in the middle of my lawn, kind of saying, this is where I want to be. And so now it's starting to create new areas that I want to go expand my yard into, which actually does remind me of another thing that's important. You should look into it in your own area where you live. So where I live in Montgomery County in Maryland, there's a program called Rainscapes. And Rainscapes, so Montgomery County in this part of Maryland, and then Virginia as well, and I think even all the way up into Pennsylvania, is all part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And so all the storms and all the rain, everything else all comes down, eventually flows into the Chesapeake, which is polluted. And they've been trying to heal the Chesapeake for years. The county here has come up with a program where they actually pay homeowners and also corporations to put native rain gardens in their lawn areas to help divert the storm flow. Because remember that picture I showed of the root systems, when the ground opens up, because you've got the roots going down much deeper, when it rains, the rain gets absorbed instead of running straight to the storm drains and right to the Chesapeake. And so I just got approved for my yard for actually Rainscapes will pay up to $7,500 to an individual property owner to put in a native rain garden in Montgomery County. It's a really simple application process. And my CFO actually just got approved for his house as well. We just applied it and, went through a quick video Zoom call with the person. We put in some paperwork and now we're approved. And they will reimburse us for getting this free garden put in. These programs exist all over the country. There are programs in California where they will pay you to rip out your lawn and put in drought-tolerant plants. In Pennsylvania, it's to restore a meadow on lawn in your yard. So lots of programs out there. I highly recommend you look into ones in your area as well, see what's there. We have a database we're building of them, so you can always contact Garden for Wildlife as well, and we'd certainly be happy to help you with that too. So a couple of questions about the West Coast. We are not in the far western states yet. That's just a function of we're 2 years old. We're growing as fast as we can, but we can only get so far so fast. We hope to be there by end of next year. So we are absolutely still expanding in lots of places. I'm super excited about doing that. On the question, somebody wrote about community cats and will it deter butterflies and bees? Not that I've seen. My cats are a bad example. They're really, really bad at catching anything, which is actually a good thing. But there's a kind of refrain out there that says the reason birds have disappeared is cats eat too many birds. That's actually not why. The main reason why birds have been disappearing is exactly this. We've taken away their food sources. There are many, many fewer birds out there as a result of that. So if your cats are outdoors, your cats are outdoors. Plant more native plants if you want to try to balance that a bit, would be my simple answer. What plants attract hummingbirds? So, Karine, we actually have, if you go on to our website, we actually have a Hummingbird Heroes collection, which there's a number of different birds, plants, including columbine, I think is one. I could pull up the list and show you. I will admit, I'm 2 years into this journey learning about the native plant world. So I am not the horticultural expert in our team. We actually have a scientific horticulturalist who does all of our collection creation and all of our plant design and selection, because it's important that you put the right ones together. And our collections are designed to provide blooms across multiple seasons, because if you just plant one kind of plant, like milkweed, for instance, is great for monarch caterpillars. But what about when they turn into adults? You still need pollen for them when they're there for the next few seasons. So the monarch collection actually has 3 different plants in it: milkweed, but then also I believe I think it's blue stems, and there's something else which I'm completely blanking on now that I'm actually on a webinar. But you can find all that on there. And in fact, you can actually select, if you go in the filters on the side, you can say, I only want to see plants that support hummingbirds or bees or butterflies or whatever you like. It's just like Yelp. You can filter it and then you can find exactly what you're looking for. We hope to have California by later next year, Brad. So I would love to be there. I mean, that's my home state. I would love to be there right now. It's just we're still identifying growers that we can partner with and add to our ecosystem. Probably your code enforcement officer. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so I don't know. So, Julia, I don't know what state you're in, but it's actually really interesting because like Maryland's just passed a law that makes it so that HOAs can't prevent you from having native plants in your yard, which is a huge breakthrough here, because there's actually many laws out there in a lot of places that they were designed not knowing how important native plants were to prevent people from putting native plants in their yards. And so you actually have to work on that. So there's a whole bunch of legislative work being done in the background by NWF and their affiliates and many partners and other not-for-profits to fix these laws. If you're running into something like that, I'd say the first thing you do is say, what specifically is the code? Because then you've got something you can point to, and then figure out how to go and get that changed if that code still exists. But in some places, it's not legal for them to do that. You can actually, so Stephanie, great question about bees, birds, etc. Nature doesn't segregate their plants out. It just, the plants grow. The main thing is you want to grow the plants in a way that like tall plants aren't shading small plants, so they're not getting enough sunlight for where they want to be. So it's about more your layout, your design. If you buy collections from us, they actually come with planting guides that actually show optimal layouts of the plants, but you put them together. So you don't have to have the bee area here and the bird area there, unless you want to. They're going to go where they're going to go. They're just going to fly around, so it's better to do that. I don't know the answer, Marianne, on the mosquito fogging and the monarchs. That's actually a great question. It's worth looking into. So I'll find out about that. So Oh, no, Nature's Best Hope, not Best Home. Um, Jacqueline. And let's see. Melinda, the question about the native nurseries in your area, I will actually type my email address in here so you have it. And feel free to send it to me. And if anybody else wants it, it's here as well. There's my email address. I think it showed up. And oh, Julia, you're in the Chicago suburbs. That's a good question. On a side note, there's another partnership we're working on right now in Chicago with the Archdiocese there as well. So it turns out the there's a whole program that the National Wildlife Federation launched a few years ago called Sacred Grounds, because there's obviously a natural alignment between, regardless of faith, houses of worship, and the environment, if you believe in that connection. And a lot of groups have gotten together. There's actually a big group internet or nationally called Interfaith Power and Light that's brought together lots of different people from different faiths, whether it's temples and churches and mosques and gurdwaras and all kinds of things together in one big group, and they're all working on putting native gardens in their properties and in their area. So we've now got connected to that as well. So if anybody is interested in that or working with that, definitely let me know about that as well, because this is a program we're rolling out. But you mentioned Chicago, and that reminded me of it. Let's see, what else am I missing here? Buckthorn. Yeah, I honestly, Kelly, on the question of the land in Waukesha, I don't really have a good answer on that. In terms of removal, actually, one thing that you can do that we've done some. So both of my kids are in Scouts. My son and my daughter are both in Scout troops. They're actually brother and sister troops, and we regularly do. In fact, we're doing one this weekend. Cleanups to remove invasive species and restore lands, whether it's on properties, on nature trails, etc. It might be something where there's a local scout troop or an Eagle Scout looking for a project that you can actually engage in doing that as well, because they're always looking for things to do like that, and it very much aligns with their mission too. Did I miss any of the ones here, Kara? I don't think I did. Just scrolling through here. Sorry, everybody. You're watching me scroll on a computer. So what do I think? Oh, anonymous attendee. So about a pond. Well, as you saw, I put one in mine. It was actually, I think it's fantastic. I think ponds are great. And when you think about certified wildlife habitat, there's 4 key requirements you need to certify your property, and you do it yourself. It's a self-certification, but then you can get a certificate and a sign that you can put up. And I have a sign in front of my yard. One of them is the 2 sources of food. So the plants that have seeds on them is a source of food for the birds. And then the other one is you can put up a bird feeder, for instance. I have many bird feeders in my backyard, and those are good for the adults, but not for the babies. The second one is a source of water, which can be a bird bath or it could be a pond. So this would meet that requirement. Then you need a form of shelter. So think of like shrubs or places like that where birds can hide, and a place to raise young. And I built with my daughter probably 12 bird houses that are now around our yard. And we have all kinds of really interesting birds living in them now. So you do that and you can certify your habitat. Side note that's interesting here in Virginia and Maryland that I've noticed is that people who have certified habitats, if they're selling their house, the real estate agents are actually putting it in the listing as a differentiator. This property is now a certified wildlife habitat because it actually is attractive to parents with young kids, people who are environmentally minded. So it's another thing you can do for your property as well on that side. Mark, on the stormwater runoff, yes, that's actually very true. And you can see it immediately, just the difference between a rain garden or native plant garden that's got that absorptive. It's like, think of it as a sponge versus a hard counter. When water runs over it, the sponge will absorb it, the counter will just run right off. And that's basically what a lawn is. It's just like a flat surface that it runs right down. So that's why these rain gardens are so important, because it's a lot cheaper to fix the problem by absorbing the water at the source than trying to clean up the Chesapeake Bay or whatever watershed you might be in around your area. Annie's Annuals, that's a good one. I used to live near Richmond, California, up in Novato, so that would be, I would love to get a contact there if you have one. And the native plants, yeah, they have great deep roots. In fact, one of the things we're working on right now is trying to quantify the amount of carbon they sequester, because I'm sure many of you have heard about the tree plantings and all these things. People, companies will say, like when I bought a plane ticket recently, offset the carbon from your flight. And I looked into the company that's doing it, and they're planting trees in some other part of the world, but they're not really planting trees. They're putting sticks in the ground and hoping that in 20 years they'll have a forest. That's not really offsetting the carbon from today. What's great about these native perennial plants in particular is how fast those root systems grow. And so they're actually sequestering a lot of carbon as well, because those root systems last for decades. And when they go down 10, 15 feet, if you've ever seen a photo of like the actual roots when they've dug them up, they're these massive, it kind of looks a little bit like ZZ Top's beard, the one of the guys from the band, but it's pretty amazing. Any other questions here? And yes, Jacqueline, we're definitely trying to give nature a better place to live. So I want to thank everybody here for your time. I know it's taking an hour out's a lot, and I really appreciate it. And I want to give a huge thanks to World Animal Protection and Karen and the team for having me on. We love working with you. I've loved the organization for years, and was really impressed with everything that you all do there. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for the time. And if you have any questions, again, my email was in there. I know this has been recorded. Happy to answer more stuff later on. It's Native Plant Month this month. And of course, Earth Day is coming up as well. So, go get some native plants. And we are shipping already in a number of states. We will open up the rest of our shipping later this month. So people have time to get it in the ground. Oh, and last thing is, if you do plant native plants in your garden, take a picture before you start, and then take a picture a year later, because people forget. And the before and after photos are amazing. We have a ton of those on our website too.
Yeah, I actually recommend that even if you're doing a container garden. So we have a container garden we rent, and the absolute difference last year was the first year we did it, and how tall and how fast everything grew. Even for a novice in gardening like me, I was completely shocked. So definitely take your before and after pictures. But thank you so much for being here. We love working with you. This is a wonderful partnership, and we are excited to see where it grows.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us.